Well, welcome to Wellness Talks and happy 2026. This is the first Wellness Talk series for 2026, and it's Women's History Month. And what better way to roll out something new during Women's History Month than to talk about our subject, which is whole woman reproductive wellness from menarche to menopause. And yes, we're going to have an amazing conversation today. So, we're not going to begin with pathology, but we're going to talk about design. Many of us were taught, how to hide our cycle. It was like a bad thing. It was, the curse. We've heard all kinds of things about it. We've heard about red parties, rites of passage, all of these things, but no one was really ever taught really how to manage our symptoms, right? We were taught that, oh, now that you have a cycle, you can get pregnant now, right? We were taught that, but not really how to understand what our body is going through. And so, our goal with this Wellness Talk series during Women's History Month is to just really unpack some of the things that we've been taught that maybe were wrong, but also to really lean into how to really steward our bodies, right? And what you don't understand, you can't steward. I mean, it just is what it is. Ecclesiastes 3 says that there's a time and a season for everything. And your body is not random. Your body is seasonal. And I have an amazing guest co host who will be facilitating these sessions with me this month. We may even bring in a special bonus person, just to kind of mix it up a little bit. And so I want to again welcome you to another amazing series of wellness talks. At this very moment, while we're recording this, the sun is setting. And I happen to be in the studio, the actual Marketplace Pastors podcast studio, which you all have not seen yet. And we have this amazing light when we have amazing windows and amazing lighting in here. And the sun is setting. So if you see this little black square, it's just literally the shadow from my laptop because I'm not sitting in front of the actual podcast cameras today, but that'll be gone. And so you'll kind of see the lighting change a little bit. So bear with us because at the time that we're recording this, the lighting is changing and the sun is setting. So I wanted to put that disclaimer out there so you're not like, what is this square? What is this black box? Because it might irritate you like it's been irritating me. Okay. So I'm going to invite to the stage one of my new friends who I've met in the women's health space who has really captured my heart. We have many things in common. Dance, right? We have the Lord in common. So, family, I am so honored to introduce our guest co-host for this whole woman reproductive wellness conversation, Miss Daneshia Sterling. Daneshia is a dedicated pregnancy and fertility health coach whose work beautifully bridges education, advocacy, and evidence based holistic care. Daneshia earned her lean certification in health coaching through the Dr. Sears Institute with specialized training in pregnancy coaching. In 2023, she further expanded her expertise, becoming a certified fertility support specialist and doula through Bibo Mia. Her passion for reproductive health began early in life with a deep calling towards obstetrics and gynecology. And although her path unfolded differently, she has continued to faithfully walk in the direction of pregnancy, fertility, and maternal support. As a pregnancy and fertility health coach, she empowers families and individuals to make informed decisions tailored to their unique journeys. She is especially passionate about addressing disparities in minority reproductive health and providing safe, holistic services that promote thriving families through education, advocacy, and awareness. Academically, Daneshia holds a Bachelor of Arts in Marketing and Advertising Communications with a minor in economics, a Master of Science in Housing and Consumer Economics with a minor in gerontology, and a Master of Business Administration. She is currently pursuing her doctorate degree to deepen her understanding of the intersection between economics and health, which gives her a powerful lens on both systemic and personal wellness challenges. Beyond her coaching practice, she is also the creative force behind the health and wellness lifestyle brand, Simply Starling, where she helps individuals simplify holistic living. Today, we are bringing together faith, physiology, and practical wisdom. And I am so grateful to have her voice in this space. Welcome to Wellness Talks, Daneshia. I want y'all to just settle in because we kind of find in our rhythm, we're finding our flow.
Yeah.
This is episode 1, but at the same time, it's going to be amazing. So as we pick up momentum, it's also at the end of the day for us, y'all. So we're like, so bear with us. We'll have caffeine next time. We'll have some caffeine the next time. All right, Daneshia, go ahead and introduce yourself to the people.
Okay, well, I'm on the East Coast, so good evening, wherever you are, good afternoon, good morning, whenever you watch this. Hey, hi, hello. My name is Daneshia Sterling. I am a Georgia native, and I am currently a doctoral student getting my degree in health administration and operational leadership. So that's education. So we're going to just scoot that over to the side. Nevertheless, my history with reproductive health started, I wanna say, when I was a preteen. Typical, just going through your, becoming what they like. I like how you said is a woman, right? We
Mm-hmm.
gotta talk about that. I hate that term. I hate it. I hate it. Hate, loathe.
But that's the
Um,
language people
it
use,
is, and
right?
it's so scary, and it's just wrong because there's so many things and attributes of becoming a woman. But nevertheless, typical age years of when you start your cycle, or most females start their cycle. So I think I was around, I don't know, 11 or 12 maybe. And I just remember my grandfather, I will remember this story forever. My grandfather was taking me to Dairy Queen at the time, and I was just like, I'm not feeling well. I was like, what is, I was cramping. I didn't know what it was. I really didn't. I was just like, oh my gosh. And fast forward, he got me some ice cream, probably one of the worst things to do. And I got home and I just ran to the restroom, and then like I started yelling because my cycle had came on, and my mom was like, "What's wrong with you?" And I was like, "I'm bleeding." She was like, "Oh, okay, let's go ahead and have this talk." And that was my introduction into administration. That was my introduction. And I fast forward, I just like, that was the first time I had like a cramp, and it would be like maybe another year or two before I started to have severe cramps. Now I was athletic. I played every sport known to man. I was vegetarian, so I didn't, I was like, I'm healthy. I don't understand. I was very attuned with my body. But I had the worst cramps that debilitated me, where it wasn't until I think the first time I started having severe cramps was like mid high school, maybe 10th grade. And my mom had to just come pick me up from school. And I think I stayed in the bed for 2 days. And I remember this girl at the time, we were in anatomy class, like ironically. And prior to that, I don't think I had a cramp yet. And I just
Mm.
remember her sprawling out on the floor, and I thought she was being dramatic. I was like, "Girl, if you don't get up off this floor, we got a test to take." And she was balled up, and my anatomy teacher just left her on the floor. Well, come
Wow.
to find out, she was having cramps, and I was like, "Well, I don't ever want that." And it would just be maybe a couple of months before I experienced, um, the terror of cramps. That fast forward, got to college, and it just intensified. And the one thing that I think made it worse was the lack of education in school, because back in the day, they would talk about sex ed, but no
Mm.
one prepared females for their menstruation, for their cycles. We didn't talk
Mhm.
about those things. Everything was just clumped up in, oh, sex ed. And I got to college, and I was just pumped with drugs. Like, I was taking 800 milligrams like they were Skittles.
Wow.
And it down, I mean, taking them. So my only thing my doctor would say was pre-medicate. Well, no one told me the, side effects of taking such heavy medication, because I now have really bad GERD. My doctor's like, "Do you drink?" And I'm like, "No, my stomach lining has been severely damaged because of just taking, those types of medication for an extended period of time." And that's when I started to just kind of go through, like, at an early age, in college, just trying to figure out what can I do? My mom was very holistic, but, I started just going through the phases of, "Okay, I gotta figure out what this is." So it would be, I don't know, I started taking medicine in high school, college, so over 15, something
Wow.
years of just taking that. Then you're pre-medicating before your cycle comes on. The let's not even we can go there, but, just the type of sanitary napkins that you're using, they were tearing me up, okay?
Mm,
Tearing me up. And I later found that, they were, just making irritations, just making my cycles worse because of the chemicals in them, and I was
mhm,
just like, "This isn't helping." So I around the time I got to grad school at the time, like, I would miss class some days or just, like, my whole weekend, I would just pray, "God, please just let my cycle come on the weekend so that I could just sleep and not miss class." And so most of my cycles were on the weekends, but you talking like 2, 3 days in the bed or just kinda so sluggish that you don't have enough energy. Fast forward, after I graduated grad school, I ended up getting a health certification, and part of that certification was maternal health. But at the time, this is, like, how the Lord really started to how he was training me as a prophet. Now, I had always been prophetic, but I didn't know I was a prophet at the time because back then nobody was like, you know what I mean, like talking about that, especially where I was in the space that I was in the church I was in. But I was like, God, I just something like I just know things, you know what I mean? So
mhm.
went through my certification, and part of that was maternal health. But because I was vegan, and I'm still am plant-based vegan, I focused so heavily on that. And one day the Lord was just like, I don't want you to get wrapped up in that. And so that's what my business was at the time. I was so focused on that. And he had just given me this really intense dream. And I started just realizing like how he was shaping my prophetic gift. I would just know when women were having issues with their cycles, if they had like an abortion, if they had a I just knew, and that was the Lord. I have to give honor to God, like God, and just you know what I mean, like Holy Spirit, because that wasn't me. And so
Mhm.
I now see, like, the path that God had me on or how he was forging my path, but it would take, like, really during COVID for me to make a decision to literally shift my whole business model into, where I am now, which is Simply Prefer. And so my business is Simply Prefer, it's simplifying reproductive health and wellness. And so I've just been on this journey of, advocacy, awareness, education when it comes to all things reproductive health and just really, really wanting to be a voice and a bridge and a, bridging ministry, which is a broad term, but faith ministries in the marketplace when it comes to reproductive health. And so that's pretty much where my journey is and how I've got to where I am now.
That's so good and so amazing. I always like to tell people that, God wastes nothing. And if
Mm,
you really follow the thread in your life
mhm,
back to childhood,
mhm.
it'll give you a great indication of who you are and who you were called to be.
That's
For me, I never understood, the prophetic in my life either
mhm.
until I had a conversation with one of my cousins, and she was like, "Oh, no, cousin, you used to always tell me things that nobody else knew, like,
Yeah.
even when you was, like, in elementary school and middle school." And I was like, "Really?" She said, "You would just tell me about people and relationships, and, you knew instinctively when to do things even when I would be mad at you about it. You just knew what to
Yeah.
do." And I'm like, we fell out about some stuff. I had to tell because it was like life or death, right? And come to find out it was the right thing to do, right? And I love those full circle moments, how God will bring you back to where you began before. I always say before the trauma happened.
Yeah.
Because most of us were on a trajectory of
Mhm.
becoming who God called us to be, but because of the weight of the assignment that we were called to carry in the earth,
Yeah.
we had an adversary that did everything that he could to destroy that, to stop
Mhm.
that, to reroute us, right? And so we have these many detours that life takes us
Mhm.
on, but at the end of the day, everything comes back full circle. And God says, "This is who I called you to be." And then once you're back in that healed and whole space, right? You start to remember, oh, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, everything before the trauma happened starts to come back to you.
I
The
like
dream
that.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
dreams you used to have as a child start to come back. The revelations that God would give you about who he was and who you were start to come back. And it's like the Holy Spirit literally takes you back to that place. Like this is who you were before the trauma happened, right? And that's what it sounds like even as you were sharing your story, that it's a full circle moment for you. Like when you gave the story about, how difficult your cycle was, right? And the experiences that you went through in your childhood and your teen years, and how not knowing how to manage those symptoms, you just start popping pills. A lot of people, ibuprofen,
Yep.
Tylenol,
Tylenol.
BC powders. Like people are just, they've got symptoms, and rather than trying to get to the root cause of what's causing the symptoms,
Yeah.
which is what we do as wellness practitioners, they're just numbing it, right? And before
Yeah.
you know it, now you have liver disease.
Yes.
Now you have GERD, right? Now you have all these digestive issues, like you
Digestive
can't
issues.
digest your food and you have no digestive enzymes in your body. So you have to
Mhm.
take digestive enzymes to get your body to even digest
Yeah.
correctly. And a lot of times it's because of the unhealthy coping. And unhealthy coping is not just drugs and alcohol. Unhealthy
Yeah.
coping is taking prescription medication and over the counter medicines.
Mhm.
And we have got to stop doing that to our bodies because it will have catastrophic events. And your life is an example of that,
It
right?
is. It
And so
is.
and
Yeah.
so why do you think, when I think about that, why do you think no one taught us that? Why do you think that the understanding of the female anatomy and the reproductive process in our tweens, because many of our children even now are starting younger and younger, 9, 10,
7.
11.
I had a friend that started at
What?
7. 7. She was 7,
My
and I
God.
cried for her. She was 7. 7.
Yeah, see? Wow. See, and that goes back
7.
to, again, it goes back to the food. It goes back
Yeah.
to our diet, our stress levels. It might even go back to some other things that are happening inside the home that we don't wanna talk
Mhm.
about.
That part.
That part.
That part. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, why do you think that no one really taught us about this?
Like, I wanna just say one thing because you said before the trauma started. So,
Mhm.
a lot of where I am now is because I didn't go to med school like I wanted to. I wanted to be an OB. And growing up, it was just like my parents were divorced when I was very young. And so it was just like I'm technically first generation, and it's like go to school for dot, 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 and I went to school for marketing, but I've always just been a health, like, my friends are like, they would call me crunchy or, like, sunflower child. But it was, just you like my mom, it was just me and my mom. Now my parents are, we get along, we're all great. But growing up single parent, it was like, do what you need to do. And so that was the first thing. So I'm like, I've always been here, so just putting that caveat there as well. But reintroducing what you just stated, I have to say this. I really just believe a lot of it starts with minority communities. We don't know. It's really like a folklore or tale, like, hey, like you mentioned it earlier, um, your period start, you can get pregnant. Well, yes and no. But when you have the lack of education, and that's not to attribute to our parents because of wherever you were geographically and what education that was given to you, you start to pass that down. And then before you know it, you're looking at a twofold system of your home and then the healthcare system and or the medical system. When I look back at where I was and what was happening, I'm almost kind of perplexed and just shocked. Like the only thing you could give me or prescribe me was drugs, right? Let's not even start on birth control pills, which I have never taken ever. And I was just very staunch about that. Now, that's no shade to anyone that does it, but I just, at an early age, I remember, I just remember seeing people take birth control pills. And I mean, hey, shout out to those that do. But, and if that does regulate your system, because that's the thing you hear, we always hear something and just take somebody's word versus just going the extra step. But if you don't know where to look, or if you're not in a community or around individuals that have that information, then you'll just go with the culture. But when you will see individuals in your community where people are like, oh, they just super healthy, hippies, yada, yada, yada. But at the end of the day, you look at them now and they're still living, they're thriving, and they're healthy. There was something that they knew that they weren't just going with the system. And that's not saying Western medicine is wrong, but there are so many things that go into um just that pharmaceutical industry that when you look at it, it's like it's really on a total like on a total system, it's not really aiding because like you mentioned, it's only getting to the symptoms. So in a household, especially in the minority community, it was your cycle started, you a woman, don't get pregnant. No one knew about hormones. It was just she got an attitude, she don't wanna be around anybody. So you just continue to get all of these like culture norms, and that becomes your construct. And it's just like, can somebody just deviate and just at least try? You know what I mean? And so it starts to build unhealthy habits, but it starts in your home, unfortunately, if you don't when you're ignorant, and I don't mean that in a negative way. Ignorant just means in this context, you just lack the information and knowledge of it. You just go with what you know. And then that just perpetuates a cycle until, you one day somebody's like, let me at least, we have technology. Let me at least figure this out. Let me look at my counterparts, you know what I mean, and see what they're doing. And why they may not be doing this or whatever the case is. So that's something, it's trial and error. But I had to start looking at like other cultures a little bit. I'm not saying I'm diving into new age, but I grew up very kind of like herbal. My mom did
Mhm.
not take medicine. I was born and I was always sick. But in my family line, we just more, we're herbal people. So I just started to kind of like, okay, let me look at this. Let me, research it. By that time, it was a lot of stuff, studies coming out about, the type of sanitary pads that came out, the materials and chemicals they were using. So it's just like, let me at least look into this and the studies of it, and then start making my own conclusions from that point. And so it slowly but surely started to work a lot better at that point.
And I completely agree with you on that. And even just to, put a pin and highlight the fact that, not all herbal remedies are new age. A lot of this
Right.
stuff came from culture. And a lot of these cultural things are better for you than the medicine
Yeah.
model, right? I call it the sick care model.
Mhm.
The medical model focuses on crisis management, right? Interventions, right? It's not about helping you get to the root of why this is happening in the
Yeah.
first place, which is one of the reasons that I became a holistic wellness practitioner is because people around me were getting sick and dying of things and I wanted to know why.
Mhm.
What is this cancer of the blood? How does
Mm.
cancer get in your blood? The only
That
way
yeah.
cancer can get in your blood is through the products that we use. We put our hands in toxic chemicals, wash our skin is our largest organ.
Yeah.
So what's going on with the water?
Yeah.
Is it toxic chemicals in the water? We use these harsh soaps on our
Yeah.
skin that can be toxic, right? The products that we use to wash our clothes, like the laundry,
Yes.
all the things, so that's what's causing the cancer of the blood because, again, your skin is your largest organ. So if you're putting things on your body, in your body, you're submerging your hands. Like I know back in the day, the older people used to use bleach and they would
Yes.
put their hands in bleach.
Yes.
And I'm like, that's gotta be toxic. Right. And if you got a cut or anything on your finger or you've done
Yeah.
anything, that stuff goes right to your
Into your
bloodstream. And I don't
bloodstream.
think people understand that's why they make the gloves to clean with. But a lot of people don't use gloves to clean with. I mean, little
Yeah.
simple things that we can do in
Yeah.
order to live a clean life. And when we talk about
Plain
a
like
clean
yeah.
life, we're not talking about behaviors, right? We're talking about the things that we put in and on our body. I mean, the behaviors too, yes, but this ain't about that. Right. This is about what we put in and on our bodies because again, our skin is our
Our s
largest organ and it absorbs everything, right? I think that that miseducation of the cycle, where like I think you even mentioned this in your introduction, it was reduced to reproduction only, right? Even in the schools,
Yeah.
there was no
First
hormonal
they could,
literacy in
yeah.
the schools.
No.
It was all about sex education. You having a
Yeah.
period, you can get pregnant. But what about hormonal literacy?
Literacy.
Because I'm telling you, this hormonal literacy piece is huge. And we don't start talking about hormonal literacy until you start having menopause or you perimenopausal.
Yeah,
That's when
or
we
trying to
start,
have a
or when you,
baby.
or pregnant,
Yep.
right? Or are you pregnant? Now we talking about hormones, but you don't hear
Mhm.
things about hormones until now I'm ready to conceive or I have conceived or now I'm perimenopausal and I'm going into menopause. But hormones affect you when you first
Everything.
start your cycle.
Yeah.
Hormones affect every part of who you are. And when
Yeah.
your hormones are out of whack, now you have a chemical imbalance. So
That's
when we
it.
hear the term chemical imbalance, especially in women, that means
Mhm.
hormonal imbalance. So
Yep.
people use these words and these terms, and there's no explanation. It's just buzzwords that people use. And I hope that we could really help people understand that
Mhm.
as we unpack this series throughout the rest of the month.
Yeah.
And many women again were ashamed when they started their cycle. It was
That
like a
part,
bad
yeah, it was a bad
thing, right?
thing. 'Cause,
Yeah.
I love that you said that, yeah, the chemical
Yeah.
imbalance, because it does put a stigma on, we're in this popular culture now of mental health, and I don't take that lightly, but we do just use that word chemical imbalance, and don't let a celebrity come out and be like, "They bipolar." Not everybody wanna be bipolar, but, it really is, it boils down to, like you mentioned, because your hormones are nothing more than chemicals being at a message center going throughout your body to all of your important organs. And so I'm really glad that you said that, because hopefully that'll free some women and or men that, like, there really may not be anything wrong with you. And if you do have a chemical imbalance, please go see a practitioner. But, it could just be your hormones just off. A headache sometimes could just be like a drop in your estrogen, in which we all both sexes have both. But, it's just making sure levels are balanced at the end of the day. So I'm so glad you said that.
Girl, I mean, there's so many things. I mean, it's so many things. I mean, even the word monarchy.
Mhm.
Monarchy. Is it
Gotcha.
monarchy? Monarchy. Like, I can't even say it sometimes. It's like monarchy. That's such a beautiful word, right? Menstruation. That's such a beautiful word, right? And I remember early in my career in health and wellness when I was working at the American Cancer Society. I also was able to do these programs called Teen Health, Hygiene, and Beauty. I had
Mhm.
a partnership with Procter& and Gamble, and Procter& and Gamble was the corporation who produced
Mhm.
the Always pads and
Mm.
tampons and all the things. And so basically what they did is they sent me cases and cases and
Mm.
cases of these starter kits to go out and educate middle school girls. We never really went to the elementary level because again, at that time, I
Yeah.
don't think as many girls were having their cycle
Yeah.
that early. So we focused on middle school girls. And sometimes I did high school as well, just depending on what was going on with that school calendar. But when I started to teach the girls about their menstruation and then
Mhm.
what is happening with their bodies and how to wear a pad and if you
That
decide to wear a tampon and why you would need a tampon if you swim or if you play sports and things like that. I literally taught these girls and these girls had never heard this
no
before. They
idea.
literally had to have a waiver signed by their parents to even participate in these sessions. And I'm like, God, I think it's time for us to bring that back and
Yes.
this time we need to add, healthy products, things that are
Mhm.
not toxic. Because now, like you said, we found out that most of the chemicals that we were taking were toxic, which leads to endometriosis,
Cancer, cervical cancer. I
cervical
had a friend
cancer.
that died early when I was in elementary school. Got in high school and found out what she passed in high school. She had cervical cancer. We had never. You talking about, like, we, like, 11, 12, 13, like, what is that? Cervical cancer. Like, what the heck? What is that?
And you know that, really what I think was leading to this cervical cancer was girls were using tampons and they don't realize
Mhm.
that you're supposed to change tampons every 1 to 2 hours. They were leaving tampons
Yeah.
in. all day, which it begins to release
It's
toxic
toxin.
chemicals throughout your body. Nobody taught them that. Most people don't even read the package that tells you you're supposed to change those tampons
Yeah.
at least 1 to 2 hours, even if it's not soaking, even if it's not a
Mhm.
lot in there, it's the toxicity that's being released from it
Yeah.
that causes these things to happen in your body. So many women who are suffering with endometriosis,
Mhm.
who are suffering with, cervical cancers, a lot of times it's because of the products that we were using.
I just find it so I was so when you were just talking about, going into the school systems and having to sign a waiver because I found it so interesting that you could talk about sex, but you had to sign a waiver. Girls didn't even know how to put on a pad. And I remember like a couple years ago, I was talking and I was talking to an adult and she was just like, let me tell you something. Please try to figure out how to do this program because she said, when I take my daughter to school and her friends, they really like they don't know how to put on a pad. And I say, what do you mean they don't know how to put on a pad? That's kind of she was like, it's just girls messing up their clothes. And I was just it broke my heart because
Yes.
I don't know where the gap was with certain generations but, when I was coming up, we had like, girl, like if you didn't have enough, we was passing, pads under the stall, like we had you. And if you didn't, we was gonna tell you in the bathroom, like, hey, you know what I mean? I feel
Yes.
like that's part of the stigma too, is when you say that oh, this person on her period, or administration or whatnot, that it's like a bad thing, like you become dirty, like, oh crap, you know what I mean? Like not realizing that if you flow heavy, there's a chance, like, cause
There's a
I'm a
chance.
heavy flow, there's a chance. So I always prepared that on certain, like around that time, I had on black jeans 'cause or some dark denim, but I actually had to and I was playing sports and running track, so I had to wear girdles because I would just bleed so heavy, and when you play sports, for some individuals, it makes you heavier, for others, depending on your sport, your cycle could, you can miss your cycle. I will share this, and I do think that it ties into the trauma part. So when I was like right hitting high school, I had an eating disorder. I was both anorexic and I was bulimic, and it messed my cycle up for like a year and a half, almost 2 years. I mean, I was drastically sick where I had to be institutionalized, and I do think part of that did a number on my reproductive health system but I
Mhm.
also look at my grandmothers, both of them had hysterectomies, but nobody talks about that. I just, you know what I mean? I just talked to my mom one day. She's like, "Oh yeah, this happened." I was like, "So it was just so common. Like, why did they have that? Oh, she couldn't have another baby." Or, you know what I mean? She was having issues, so she just went ahead and took her uterus out. And I was just like, but again, this was back during, that era of what the 40s and 50s. So you had primarily white doctors that were just, doing things with on black women, not really educating them on like, hey, maybe we should try this and just, you know, all of that. But I didn't mean to do that big of a caveat, but I just find that so just like, the taboo from then to now. We didn't talk about it because of this with our grandparents, but even now, just the stigma of still like, oh, she's on her cycle and the embarrassment. There's a chance you're gonna mess your pants up. There's a chance you're gonna mess your pants. But it's really being a lot more mature of um just the female body, and this is something that we go through every month and having to prepare for the oopsies as well, and that goes into, I believe, the stigmas and taboos around it.
Yeah, for sure. And Lord knows I've had oopsies in my lifetime.
Oopsies, okay?
And the oopsies primarily happen because you're not aware of your body. You're not
Mhm,
aware of when the cycle is gonna start. You're not aware of what the symptoms mean when they start
mhm,
in the different phases. Your body has phases, right? We
yeah,
talked about cycle syncing with God, right? You
mhm,
have your menstruation phase, which is that one to
yeah,
5 days of bleeding. Some women bleed longer, right?
mhm,
Then you have that 6 to 12 days after your
after,
cycle ends. What is your body going through during that phase, right? Then you have ovulation phase, right? That's 13 to 16,
some
right? days 13 to 16 after your cycle, that's when you're
A
at
little bit,
peak
yeah.
fertility, right? That's when you can get pregnant, right? A
That's
lot of
when
people
you
don't
get
talk about
pregnant.
that's when you get
Right.
pregnant, right?
That's
You
when you
know,
get pregnant.
then you've got that luteal phase, right? Which is that 78 days right before your cycle starts all again, which is that premenstrual phase,
Yes,
right? And there's all these things happening with your body that most people don't know the phases that
the
their body is
phases.
in.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, we'll probably unpack this a little bit more on episode
Mhm.
2, where we kind of talk about the different phases of your body, what's happening during those phases, what does your body need, what are the best practices to kind of
Yeah.
handle some of those phases because we need to cycle sync. We need to
Yes.
understand what's going on with our body. And there are even
Mhm.
like apps now for that that'll kind of help you track it because when you're tracking it, you know, "Ooh, I better have a pad in my purse. I better have a tampon in my purse. I better stay close to home, things like that. I
Listen,
better wear dark colored
dark
jeans,
colored
right?
jeans.
Right? Right?
Ain't gonna
And
catch me
so
slipping.
you ain't gonna catch me slipping. Lord knows it happened to me one time and I thought I was about to die.
It happened to me in the store, a department store.
I was like, what? And I was sitting. That's the most embarrassing
We
one.
gotta talk about the rush.
When you sitting down and then you stand up
You
and you
stand
like
up.
you can feel something going
Yeah,
on with your body.
yeah.
And then you stand up and then you look back and it's all over the chair or the couch. Baby, baby, baby. You talk about
Listen.
embarrassed. I was like, I don't even know what to
Yeah.
do. I don't
Yeah.
even know what to do. I'm like, let me find something to wrap it around my
Rocking
waist.
around.
Let me go find something to clean this seat off because I done
Listen,
messed up these people's clothes.
listen.
It's a thing,
It
right? And
is.
so when you don't cycle sync, you don't know what's
Yeah.
happening with your body. You don't understand that your body is going through changes every
Mhm.
28 days.
It's like you don't catch a break.
You don't catch a
You don't
break.
catch a break.
I am woman, hear me roar, literally from the inside, from the inside.
You don't catch a break. My mom be like, "You always bleeding." I was like, "I know.
You
Make
know,
it stop."
not to mention how you sync with other women in your circle. So
God.
it's like everybody gonna be on their cycles at
Yes.
the same time.
Yes.
When you're a part of groups and stuff,
Yes.
everybody on their cycle,
Everybody.
how to deal with each other and how to be gracious and loving with each other, when we're all going through the menstruation at the same time. You gotta use the words, right? And so it is a journey.
It
And I
is.
think we need to empower women more to not only understand their bodies, but number two, to know what to do when we're dealing with very difficult things. You don't have to deal with this stuff alone. You have
Yeah.
two professionals right
Yeah.
now who are setting this whole conversation up. So if you're dealing with, chronic symptoms
And
that you have no idea where they're coming from, if you're dealing with endometriosis, if you're dealing with GERD, if you're dealing with chronic cramps, headaches, severe
headaches,
headaches,
fibroids.
fibroids. I was even just sitting here thinking I got to have Dr. Lippman on. We're going to have to bring
Mhm.
Dr. Lippman in this month to have a conversation about these fibroids. So we're going to bring him
Please.
in this month. I'm going to bring in one of my good girlfriends to talk about, this perimenopausal phase
Mm.
of life because I'm telling you, women have to deal with a lot. Not to mention when you're pregnant. I mean, that's a whole nother episode.
Anything about either one of those just yet, but,
But we're gonna bring in
it's
some
still a
people to
lot.
educate
Yeah,
us.
we keep
Yes, we're gonna bring in some
educated.
people
Yeah.
because of what we do in the wellness space, the women we work in women's reproductive health. We're not OBGYNs.
Yeah.
I'm not a midwife yet, but I will be very soon, right? I still work in women's reproductive health, right? And it's really important that I have the full scope of knowledge so that I can help clients in every phase of their life, right? That is my heart, right? And so, we're really gonna lean into this conversation on episode 2 next week. I hope that we laid a solid foundation. Please share
Yeah.
this with your daughters,
Please.
your nieces,
Your
right?
dads, your uncles, because
Your
men need
dads,
to know
uncles, because they
too.
need to know.
Women are but you not gonna just lay up with us and not know. Hey,
You need to understand.
understand.
It is a hormonal imbalance, right? But it's not mental health issues.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say,
Right.
right? It's not a mental health issue, it's a hormonal issue. But there are things as
Absolutely.
a practitioner, this your practitioner talking to you now.
Absolutely.
There are things that you can do when you cycle sync, you understand your body to minimize your symptoms.
Yeah.
Severely
Yeah.
minimize your symptoms. I'm telling you what I know, I live it.
Yeah. Me too. It's
For
worth
the
the
first time,
investment.
it's so worth the investment, and for the first time I had some symptoms, I was telling her, "Girl, I had some symptoms, I thought I had a cold. I thought I had a sinus cold. I felt horrible." And, because I had this terrible sinus headache, what I thought was a sinus headache was actually my luteal phase.
She taught me something about that because
Blew my
yeah,
mind.
we'll talk about it on next episode 'cause I had never
Yeah,
heard
next
of
episode.
that. But
Yes,
yeah.
girl. And it even caught me off guard, right? Because even though I knew I was in my luteal phase, my little apps tell me, "Oh, you're entering into your luteal phase. It's time to dot, 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 dot." Because I've trained it to tell me what I need to do in different phases. And so I started doing my things, taking my magnesium, making
Yeah.
sure that I'm hydrating, all the things. But then this headache came out of
Mm,
nowhere, and that's a new symptom for me. So we also need to talk about how your symptoms change
change.
as
Yeah.
you age. So symptoms you might have had in your
Yeah.
teens, you might not have in your 20s,
Yeah.
right? In your 20s, you might have certain symptoms that you won't have in your 30s.
Yeah.
Right? And in your 40s, you may not you'll have different symptoms. I'm telling you,
Mm,
the things I'm learning about our bodies is really mind-blowing, and I'm so grateful to be able to unpack this with you this
yeah.
month. This is some
Absolutely.
great, great conversation for
Yeah.
sure.
Absolutely.
Sure. Okay. So as you've heard today, the reproductive health process is a journey, and it starts in the very early phases of life, menarche, right? It's not just the beginning of the bleeding. It's the beginning of rhythmic biological intelligence. So, I have some questions for you. How many of you were actually taught what ovulation is? How many of you were taught your cycle is considered a vital sign? Did you know that your cycle is considered a vital sign? And so we really want to begin to unpack this conversation a little bit more. So next week, I want you to tune in because we're going to talk about the different phases, what's happening in those phases, what you can do to minimize some of the symptoms that can be debilitating. Oh my God, they can be debilitating. And some of the changes that you might go through as you navigate through your reproductive life cycle. And so stay tuned next week for part 2 of the series where we're going to unpack the 4 seasons of reproductive health. We'll talk soon. See you next time.